All right. Good afternoon. So my name is Precious.
Hi, good afternoon.
My name is.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Great to have you all here. My name is Precious Joe, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. So it's great to have you all, and we really appreciate that you've made time for us to have this great conversation. Thank you very much. So this webinar is the Expert Human Resource webinar series, whereby we'll be having conversations that, will transform the way we practice human resource in this country. As part of celebrating women in this month, we thought that we could have this conversation about maternity protection practice in Ghana, how we can analyze the law, know the gaps, and then see some of the policies we have in this country, and how best our panel can suggest and tell us the best way to go about in terms of managing maternity practice in our workplace. So I'm very grateful. This promises to be an exciting webinar, and I'm sure by the end of the whole program, we would have transformed and have a new approach in terms of managing maternity in our country. So let's try to mute our mics, and then if you have any question when the presentation is going on, kindly put a question in that board so that I will look at it, and then when we are done, I can engage our panel. Right, so we are very privileged to have the CEO of iRecruit Africa, my boss, here with us. Sandra is an HR practitioner for about 15 years experience. She worked in the United States and then Africa. So after many years of practice in the Western world, she decided to come to Ghana and start iRecruit Africa to be a game changer in the human resource consulting space. So Sandra will give us some few remarks why he led his team to put this webinar together and what she is hoping to achieve. So Sandra, thank you very much for making time with us. We want to hear from you. Yes, thank you, Sandra.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Precious, for such an auspicious introduction. I do feel very honored. I would like to welcome our August plenary and thank them for honoring our invitation. Today's topic was inspired by one of our would-be clients who was facing challenges in dealing with maternity leave for one of their employees. The client was not sure if they had the liberty to be flexible with their internal policies and did not know to which extent they could grant the employee additional leave days and at what percentage of their salary they needed to pay. This case made us realize that many other employers could be facing the same challenges. With that being said, the ILO conventions and recommendations have set out core elements of maternity protection, which include maternity leave, health protection at the workplace for pregnant and breastfeeding women, cash and medical benefits, employment protection and non-discrimination, as well as breastfeeding support after returning to work. I am extremely excited to further learn from my experience plenary how these guidelines provided by the ILO conventions have been integrated into Ghana's Labor Act, and what more can be done to protect the rights of both the employer and employee in relation to the maternity protection practice. To help us understand and create policies in our workplaces around this issue, we have with us Mrs. Hilary Dema, a lawyer, training specialist, human rights and gender equality activist, and a gender consultant with a career experience that spans over a 45-year period. She is also the former chair of the United Nations Committee on the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. Also with us today is Dr. Ebenezer Ofori-Agbetor, who is the Executive Director of the Chartered Institute of Human Resource Management, CHIRM. He is an experienced HR professional with a wide range of positions in a plethora of organizations and committees, such as former HR business partner, for Vodafone Ghana, head of HR for Ghana Airways Limited, management consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, among many other prestigious roles. Lastly, I would like to introduce Mrs. Yvonne Redu Akpabli, who is a human resource professional with over 15 years of experience in the industry. She has consulted for NGOs, telcos, media, finance, shipping industries, among many others. We are very privileged to have you all here, and I in particular cannot wait for the gems of wisdom to start dropping. Thank you so much. Precious.
Right, great. Thank you so much, Sandra, for such a splendid remarks. And for me, I'm very excited. I'm looking at the panel we have and the depth of the conversation. So we will set the ball rolling. First of all, I'll pick general remarks from our panel. So I'll start with them. Yvonne. Hello, Yvonne.
Hello. I think you muted me from your end.
Okay. Oh, right. So
yeah.
Your general remarks about the topic, your few thoughts.
I was very excited because I have very practical examples that I went through. That is maternity, or let me say maternal policies that helped me to still work and have my babies. So I'm very, very much excited that we discuss this and help other women get such opportunities as well to develop their careers whilst building their families. So I look forward to this.
Great. Thank you very much. Mrs. Bedema, please, can you help us with your general thoughts and your general remarks about the topic?
Thank you very much. And it gives me immense pleasure to participate in this webinar, almost 1 week after the International Women's Day. I therefore want to begin by congratulating employers who endeavor to provide their female employees with ideal maternity protected work environments. In particular, on the 9th of March, I read a news item that Olam Ghana had extended maternity protected work from 12 to 16 weeks. The head of HR, Mr. Adachi, said the initiative was in line with the company's core value of ensuring an all-inclusive and well-diversified workforce, which aims at leveling the playing field for all employees and new mothers especially. I think this sets the tone. And I am really pleased that this is gaining traction among employers. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Mrs. Bedema. Now we go straight to the panel conversation. So I'll start with Mrs. Bedema. You know, we experience work UN and agencies. What does the labor law say about maternity protection, and what are some of the gaps we have in the law as compared to other practices or other jurisdictions, per your experience and exposure across the globe?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaun. I would like to begin, because you began with the United Nations level, to say that maternity protection in Ghana is grounded in Ghana's international treaty obligations. We do not give maternity protection because we want to be nice or civil to women. It is because we have signed and ratified international conventions which demand that we comply with them. In particular, CEDAW states that measures countries take at protecting maternity should not be considered discriminatory. Like, nobody should say you are favoring women. No, because if you don't do so, you are discriminating against women based on sex. Then, according to Chinkin, such measures, maternity protection, are necessary to secure de facto equality, that means substantive, real equality for women, to achieve the goals of development and sustainability, to optimize the use of human capital, including women, those of women, to avoid female and child poverty, which is aggravated by the absence of proper social and economic support for maternity, and to ensure conditions for the growth of the next generation. This is the context in which we are operating. And it is very important because many times of maternity protection, and it is important to situate it in our obligations before even we get to our labor law. The two other comments I'd like to make. One is the nexus with the SDG 3 on healthy lives and well-being, 5 on gender equality, 16 on accountable institutions at all levels, and 8 on the protection of labor rights and safe and secure working environments. The next comment I'd like to make, which is extremely important, is that maternity is a social function. This means that the role of women in procreation should not be a basis for discrimination and disadvantage in respect of the financial and social burdens that they bear, which are associated with pregnancy, but it should be a shared responsibility with men. Let me be a little pedantic when I talk about social function. Now, if women do not have children, who are we going to employ? Who is going to buy the products we make? Who is going to give us a vibrant economy? So this is a social function that women perform, and therefore they should not be penalized for it. Now, because of stereotypes, maternity is seen as a women's business. And so we have what we call the motherhood penalty. Women are always at a disadvantage when we talk about maternity protection. And we'll see it, even in the best intentioned organizations, there are elements of discrimination that will come across. Good. So when we look at our Labor Law Act, a lot of it resonates with the ILO conventions. However, as Ms. Labi indicated, there are gaps. First of all, there is a provision for the annual, the maternity leave upon production by a certificate by a medical officer or a midwife. And in Ghana, we currently have 12 weeks. Then there is the protection of remuneration in our labor laws, full remuneration and other benefits to which the women is entitled. And that again is in our constitution. Then there is the opportunity that for medical conditions caused by pregnancy or confinement, the employee can have an additional 2 weeks where there are multiple births, and where there is illness certified either by the confinement or the pregnancy, she is entitled to extended leave. Nursing breaks have been spoken about for 1 hour during her working hours to nurse her baby. And then interruptions should be paid for. Then there is employment protection during maternity leave. Then, following from that, a woman cannot be reassigned, except with her consent. That is after the 4th month of pregnancy. And she cannot also be required to do night work, that is between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. or overtime. Now, where are the gaps? It's important that we set the tone before we get to the gaps. Where are the gaps? The first gap that we come across is the inadequate enforcement or implementation of the laws. I was surprised to learn that there are about 80% of women without adequate maternity protection, and they are mainly in Africa and Asia. A gap in the law, from my perspective, is a stand-alone pregnancy legislation. We ought to have it, because when we look at the requirements of the ILO Convention 183 and then its supporting guidelines, the provisions are so detailed that they cannot and they have not been covered by the Labor Act. There is, and some of the gaps I have seen is the refusal to hire because a prospective employee may be pregnant or is pregnant. I would like to challenge all those listening. How many of them were hired while pregnant? visibly pregnant? I'm sure probably nobody. And I've only seen it once in my practice, and that was in an organization I worked with at that time, SNV, where a visibly pregnant woman was hired. So this is it.
Wow.
And yes, and this is does not only, there are insidious ways. And this is why I said, when we look carefully, we will find that the discrimination is all there. During the interviewing process, people, employers ask clever questions to try and find out whether the employee is likely to be pregnant, whether she's finished having her children, whether she's going to have more children, and so on and so forth. Some employers are even more overt. They actually ask for pregnancy tests and make women sign agreements not to get pregnant within a certain period of their employment. You will recall the issue when we look at the formal sector of the fire service employees who were dismissed for getting pregnant within less than 3 years of their employment and violating, therefore, the terms of their employment. The case went to the Human Rights Court, and at the last check, that was 6 months after the judgment, they had not complied. In the informal sector, which is very important, because a lot of time we look at formal and we do not place our attention on the informal. In Kumi and Boachi Mensah's research in Cape Coast involving the informal workers, dairy processors, palm kernel processors, food vendors, and so on, they were dismissed for being pregnant. And the worst hit were the dressmaking apprentices, who are usually forbidden and dismissed immediately their pregnancy is discovered. The discrimination lies in the fact that this is an incentive to seek unsafe abortions and maternal deaths. The next gap I find is, what is employment? What do we consider as employment? Even though ILO 183 and the Labor Act make it clear that a worker is a person employed under a contract of employment, whether continuous, part-time, temporary, or casual, you will see that provisions of the Labor Act sometimes make it seem as if these entities, these groups, are not fully within the employment sector, including even domestic workers, until the passage of the recently, of the domestic workers legislative instrument recently. Very good. So this is also an issue. How am I doing for time? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Right, so with this presentation, it's 7 minutes. So you have done 6 minutes, yeah, so you have about 1 minute to wrap up with this presentation. Right.
Please, I wasn't told it was 7 minutes. Please give me 2-3 more minutes and let me just wrap up once and for all. Maybe I'll not come in again unless
granted.
Yes,
great.
Yes, sent to me.
Right.
So also being passed up for promotion because an employer is pregnant, this is not specifically stated in our labor laws. The next one is verbal harassment. And these are comments made by supervisors, co-workers, and even clients. And the reason why it is problematic is that the hostile environment is not covered in our Labor Act. The duration of the pregnancy protection, maternity leave, is also problematic because even though we have 12 weeks, the convention says it should be at least 18 weeks. I concede there are problems with a higher number of weeks, but I think this will come up in the discussion and we can look at it then. Some countries have done it very creatively and allowed the excess weeks to be taken anytime during the 1 year period, not necessarily just before and after the confinement. And then the time off for prenatal and health care is not specifically covered in our law. issues of reasonable accommodation, for example, light duty, redistribution of work among colleagues, and so on, are not also very clearly articulated, and the conditions under which this should take place. For example, in the ILO conventions, we are given guidelines. Work that needs a lot of standing, special equilibrium, vibrating machines, and all that, which we do not have here. Now, in a country like Gabon, for example, when a woman is about to take the maternity leave, she can ask for a labor inspection so that helps the reassignment. We need provisions like that, labor assignment, labor inspections, and risk assessment. And also with the breastfeeding, we have given the breaks, but we have not given the facilities. And that is also very important, in addition to the facilities for childcare. And even though initially we may think it's expensive, there are creative ways of going about this at low cost to the employer. This we can discuss further as we go along. Then I'd like to look at the funding of maternity benefits. This is critical because the reasons why employers are reluctant to give maternity leave are two. And that's what I've come out across in my practice. One, the cost. Two, the replacement. According to the ILO conventions, these are not costs that should be borne by employers or governments or so on. We have our three main funding models, but they ask that this be embedded in our social security system. Should that happen, employers will not be apprehensive about giving the leave because they are not directly bearing the cost. It is embedded in the social security system. So this again, like we can discuss when it comes to time for discussion. And then there are issues of the rural and urban differentials and the need that in looking at the legislation, we should also focus robustly on the informal and self-employment sectors. I thank you, and thank you again for your indulgence. Thank you. So I have endeavored to map the field and the gaps that are in our law that would be solved if we, or largely solved, if we had one standalone pregnancy discrimination or maternity protection law. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Mrs. Bederman. That was so insightful. That was so great. For me, I have always thought that we had a perfect labor law, but listening to you and looking at the gaps we have, I think we have a lot of work to do. And I believe that with the numbers we have, the number of human resource practitioners, stakeholders, and policymakers on this platform, sooner or later, we will table it so that the government and stakeholders can look at it and really make some amendments. So thank you so much for the eye-opener. It was so great. So our next panel, right, Mr. Alberto. So I would like to seek your view on the fact that from where you sit as the CEO for CIHRM, do you think that our labor law has done justice to maternity protection? And really what has accounted for the various pregnancy-based discriminations we have at our workplace?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Precious. Rightly said, Mrs. Bedema has really thrown a whole light on this subject, making reference to the...
Hello, sir. Can you turn on your video? Hello, sir. Can you turn on your video?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Okay, can you see me now? I think, yeah.
Sure.
I think I'm on now.
Sure, we can see you now.
Okay. All right, okay. So what I'm just saying is that Mrs. Bedema has done an extensive elaboration on the Labor Act and then the ILO Convention 183. And for me, that sets the tone. Here I will come from the practical side. And just as you have asked, that what has accounted for the various pregnancy-based discrimination at our workplaces. In Ghana, from at least what I know, is that for a start, the costs involved for employers in itself has served as a disincentive for them to carry through the implementation of this demand of the law. No one will dispute the fact that the cost involved requires that employers obviously position themselves well to appreciate what they stand to gain by actually following the law. There's a lot to gain from that. There are a lot of benefits to ensure that if you implement this, you stand to gain a lot from it. But as I said, I think quite, especially in the informal sector, a lot of these companies, small, medium companies, are kind of shun away from doing this because of the cost implication. And that's why our sister talked about discrimination. They even trying to probe as to whether you are pregnant, even when you attend interview. They may do it subtly, but all is in line in preventing somebody who is expecting to come in and only to serve 2-3 months and then is off to take about 12 weeks or so off from the workplace. The other issue is the fact that, yes, there's a lack of sanctions for non-compliance. And I think my sister also mentioned that in her presentation. If you look at the Labor Act, there's nothing there that indicates that if you do not comply, this will be the sanction that will be placed on you. So that is also not helping the situation. We also have a situation where the Labor Act itself, because it has not been reviewed for many years, you're talking about 2003 up until now. It is now that is being reviewed, and I would say that fortunately I'm on the team that is actually carrying out this review. And through this exercise, we have identified a number of gaps that pertains in the existing law, which as we go forward, I will highlight some of them and possibly the proposals on the table. I can also say that the lack of knowledge on the part of employees' rights. The employees don't know their rights. So they are not in a position to insist and demand that these rights are respected. And therefore, quite a number of people let it lie and let it be. So the employer tends to have a field day. You also have quite a number of lack of defined policies within companies. So if indeed the company hasn't got any policies covering such area, then the employees would not even know exactly what their rights are, and therefore can insist that it is respected. So we've talked about, obviously, because of the cost of employers, that is deterring them to stick to this law. And then we also talked about the fact that this law has been so much, obsolete to a large extent. We need to make it relevant to what is happening in our present world. Here again, we can also talk about lack of proper health protection at the workplace. Lack of proper health protection at the workplace. And this is certainly not helping. If indeed designated places for new mothers are not provided, then that in itself deters, the new mothers to kind of, put themselves forward to come to work. So these are some of the things that I can say that has actually led to the kind of discrimination that we see at the workplace. Briefly, a lot of the women don't even know their rights. Quite a number of these workplaces don't have policies in place. The provision of facilities are not in place. So how would the ladies or the new mothers take advantage of these available facilities? They are not there for them. And then, as I said, the lack of enforcement that employers know that they will face. if lack of sanctions for non-compliance is also in itself not encouraging employers to do what they're supposed to do. Hence, the discrimination that continue in our system as we are all witnessing. So for me, for now, I think this is what I can say to the question that you asked. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Alberto. That was great for me to know that, most employees, and especially women, don't know their right and what the law says about, maternity and pregnancy. Gives us, a lot of work to be done, because it means that state agency, NCC, and people responsible for educating us are not doing their work, because such a delicate issue as maternity protection should be an issue where everybody knows about it. So I'm sure the key stakeholders are listening, and after this webinar, we will have a presentation to them to really understand the scope of problem we have and how we can address it. Thank you so much, Mr. Alberto. We are so grateful for this presentation. Right, so I'll go to Yvonne. Hello, Yvonne.
Hi.
Right, so I want you to tell us, you have practiced in corporate and you've worked in multinationals. So from your experience as a C-suite executive, can you share with us some of the policies you brought, or some of the policies you enforced that made the maternity protection practice in your various companies, a success, and what are some of the benefits you have enjoyed as a mother?
Thank you. So before I start, I want us to understand something. And most companies don't have this mindset, and that's why we have some of the issues we face when it comes to women and the maternal package. First and foremost, reproduction is part of our responsibilities as women. We are the ones who reproduce, and Mrs. Bedema said it rightly, so I won't belabor the point. Secondly, the labor law itself, at the time it was efficient. There were only very few women working. These women had their mothers who were home, not working. So once you give birth, your baby is with your mom, a very trusted person. You go to work, come back, and your mom is there. And we also had very few women who were part of the lawmaking body who could say some of these challenges to be made into law. So it's good that now we are working on it. And socially now we see that most of our mothers are working. You are 30-something and your mother is 50-something. She's not attained her retention age yet. So she's also working. So you are forced to put the baby somewhere. I had to quit one very good job because of childbearing issues. And when we talk childbearing and these maternity packages, most employers and some men think only of the pregnancy. There's the pre-pregnancy. What happens to the woman who miscarries? What happens to the first trimester, especially for the new mother who is not coping well with the vomiting and the nausea and all that? What happens even after the 12 weeks that the law has provided? These are not considered. I've worked in one NGO where I had my first three children. We had what we call the gender policy. The policy states that if a woman gets pregnant, if the woman is a field worker, those of us who go to the communities to do the animation, as soon as we inform the office you are pregnant, an assistant is recruited for you for 1 whole year. This person understudies you for your 9 months. So by the time you leave for your maternity leave, he or she understands what you do and takes it over. If you are an office staff, the person is recruited when you are 7 months. But if you are an office staff and your pregnancy has complications, this assistant is recruited immediately. As part of the policy, when you give birth, you get your 12 weeks maternity leave. You resume and close at 12 o'clock, midday. You have closed from work. Now, when you resume, you come to work with the baby. And if you have a caregiver, the caregiver also comes with you. If you don't have a caregiver, you come with the baby. And as part of the policy, if you have a meeting, you think you can't go with the baby, you can give the baby to any staff to care for the baby for you. And the person has to take good care of that baby. And as usual, some of us, when we have such meetings, it's the CEO we give the baby to, because in any case, you are the key stakeholder of the policy. So you get World Bank staff coming to our office for meetings, and they hear babies crying, and they ask what's happening here. We tell them it's part of our gender policy, and they understand and they are okay. This is an organization where we recruit women even when they are pregnant. So far as you are fit to work, you are engaged. We started work from home way back to 2007, 2008 for pregnant women, new mothers, because we knew that you have to be productive. You have also to be reproductive. And these two roles sometimes don't go together if some of these measures are not put in place. They didn't forget the fathers. We had a paternity leave. When your wife gives birth, the first 2 weeks, you go. No matter what you are doing, you leave it and go and help your wife to care for the baby for the first 2 weeks. You've done your maternity leave. You've come, you are doing half day for a year. You are invited to a workshop in Tamale. The office will take care of you, your baby, and a caregiver. So even the room that is booked in the hotel takes that aspect, considers that aspect. What the person's food and transportation is all borne by the company. And so you do this throughout. Now, I've done my 1 year. I have to put my baby in school. You are given 1 hour off a day for 4 months to help you help that baby adjust in the preschool. So most of us, even when we resume, we don't close at 12 noon that the policy says, because you are there with the baby. Who are you rushing home for? And as part of that policy, staff were encouraged to rent around the office, and you are given support. Yes, it's a loan, but you rent the house near the office, so that when the baby is home and you are even called that this is happening to your baby, within 5-10 minutes, you are home to take care of that issue. Then there's also this other investment company I worked in, where we have, let me even mention names. It's good things, so I can mention them.
Yeah, sure.
So the NGO is Sent West Africa, located at Mumbai. Okay. Then Data Bank has a creche on site. I started Data Bank with my 4-month-old baby, and I do exclusive breastfeeding. So every 2 hours, I go to the creche, breastfeed my baby, climb back to my office as a new staff. And this creche is not just for new babies. It is also for the grown-ups who go to school around the office, who come there after close of school to wait for their parents to close at 5, so they will all go home. The creche has caregivers. When I was there, the head of the place was a retired nurse, army nurse. So discipline, caregiving was top of the, and these people are paid for that service. So they give their best to the staff and the children. And a number of children are given to one caregiver. So it's not like all the children are there and you have only one caregiver to attend to the child. The room is put and painted in such a way that it's child-friendly. There's a corner for breastfeeding and changing the babies and all that. Now, apart from this, Data Bank also gives you that maternity package, your 12 months, and then they also consider miscarriages as well as postpartum issues. And then when you resume, you have your 1 hour off. Okay. There's another media company I worked with, Class Media. I started that job with a full-blown 7-month pregnancy, very big tummy. Went for interview with the tummy, thinking it would be a problem for them. They were cool, gave me the job, and I had to quit because where I was, I knew it would be difficult to handle my baby. Wow. There's a creche close to the office, but I couldn't afford the amount they were charging. So I had to leave this very good, lucrative job because of my baby. And then fortunately got this one where I had my baby there, go to work and all that. Now, somebody will ask me, yes, this is good. So how does it benefit the company? If you go to Send Ghana now, you will realize that about 80% of their employees have been working there for over 10 years. you get retention, continuity. These people have the institutional memory of their company. So they build on it and it grows. We all know the advantages women bring when we are part of a growing concern. And these women are there to provide. Productivity goes up because instead of closing at 12, I am with the baby, so I'm there to work. I can work till 4 when I have to go home. And my home is near my child, even when he has finished the 1 year. So I'm at peace knowing that immediately they call me, I can quickly go and care for the child. But you are working in Accra and your baby's crash is in Kokomlemle. You are called and traffic alone disturbs you. You come back and I tell you can't do any meaningful work in the office. Then it also enhances the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the office space, making me know that my office understands that I'm a woman. Yes, and as part of my biological makeup, I make children, I make babies, and they make room for that, understanding that my babies will grow in future to also enhance competitiveness. There are people who would want to work for a company like Send Ghana, a company like Data Bank, packages, part-time with your baby. So once you are there to do, like I said, at Data Bank, every 2 hours, I'll go down and breastfeed. Sometimes I get so engrossed in the work that the head of the place will send you a WhatsApp message. My friend in the car. By the time I get home, I give my last breast milk, and she's so cute for the day, fresh, renewed to face the day again with my baby. So it's something that should be part of policy, aligned to society and other segments. Ghana Health Services is saying that exclusive breastfeeding. How many working mothers can do exclusive breastfeeding? We know they can express, but we know the challenges that come with the expression. So women can't even get the milk when they try to express. So it's important that we put these in policies, we put these in our employer brand packages to make the companies stand out and make women feel at ease for being women, because reproduction is part of us. It is part of who we are. So we can also give the best we can. So there are companies doing amazing things. I know APSA has a very formidable APSA in Guinness, Ghana, a maternity package, very, very beautiful ones out there. So other companies, and especially the government sector, should also copy so that we can feel good as women when we are working and not be apprehensive when we get pregnant. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. That was, for me, mind-blowing. And right, and for me, the government sector really needs to learn from the private sector, because at the end of the day, women are important and very, very significant in terms of the human race. So thank you so much, Yvonne. I picked some few things. The fact that we need to have a clear gender policy. Every company in Ghana, he said, under the Ghanaian law, should have clear gender policy. That was great. And I picked one the way you said we have to be productive, but we also have to be reproductive. That I want to engage Mrs. Bedema. Okay, so Mrs. Bedema, right, when you look at maternity protection legislation globally, what are some of the challenges in the field of maternity protection practice? And what should companies and employers do so that these challenges does not prevent them from giving the best to our women and also ensuring productivity at the workplace? So when you look at, the whole maternity protection globally, what are some of the challenges we have? And so companies are not able to adopt this sound and presentation.
Video started because the challenges have been very well outlined. Yvonne gave us utopia.
Wow.
Exactly. I have worked in a company like that. But the thing is that it costs money. And this is why the first port of call is looking at the financing model.
Exactly.
As long as it's going to come from the employer, this will only happen in blue chip companies.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen across the board, neither is it going to happen with the government. As I said, the ILO provisions made it clear that these interventions should not come from government, but should be embedded in the social security system. I think this is the linchpin, this is the key. If you cost what we have heard, which I have seen also, it's not unusual how many companies can do so. And if this is the norm, it's going to be a disincentive for employing women. But if the employer knows that this is not coming directly from my pocket, it will be the normal thing all over the place. And it won't be something that we would be, talking about as if it's out of the world. That's the first point. As I said, the three most common models of funding are government mandated social security, where everybody contributes, so employers, employees, taxpayers contribute. Employer liability, which we see now, where the employer pays for all these services. And the third is a mixed model. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, the ILO Committee on Experts prompted the government of Ghana to ensure that these benefits are provided by means of compulsory social insurance or out of public funds and not paid by the employers in public and private sectors. So the first is funding. The second is creativity. In Mozambique, for example, this crash situation that we are spoken about, in one instance, it was a nearby hotel that gave them a room. And in this room, all the facilities that we have heard Yvonne talk about were there. And this hotel was close to the employer's venue. So this form of creativity, where we think outside the box and ask for other private sector actors. There is also what was started at the ministries, crashes in a central location, but I don't think that was sustained. And we need homegrown solutions like this to help us navigate this field. Now, we also need the awareness of rights. Women themselves should have their voices heard as to what they want and how these can be implemented. And it has also happened in jurisdictions where instead of leaving the amendment of the law and policies to experts, we hear from those who feel the pinch as to what can be done and how it can be done. We've talked about also clear definitions in policy. We the Labor Act is almost 20 years old. But the minute it was enacted, please let me know when I have 1 minute more, okay? Because I'm not looking at my time very carefully. As soon as it was enacted, we were asked to do a survey, an analysis of it. And many of the things I'm saying today, I've said 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago. So we need to hear from the actual stakeholders as well, proper redefinition of who is an employee, because you will also recall that there was recently, I think about 2 years ago, some lawyers doing pupillage got pregnant and they were dismissed. These were even lawyers. So the absence or the not filling the gaps in the law is part of it. Policies that work and that don't need much. I mentioned earlier that employers have two concerns. One is concern, the other is replacement. Yvonne talked about replacement, and you can see how well that replacement was done, 1 year. But there are other creative ways of knowledge sharing. In one organization in which I headed the HROD committee, Human Resource Organizational Development Committee, we had a policy that if you go for a course, on your return, you must share what you learned, both with employers, the co-employees, and as part of the institutional memory. So if you are a woman who went on maternity leave for 1 year during that period, you have access to this information. And when you return from maternity leave, you will not find yourself behind in the knowledge gap because you were not there. This is another issue that we must also deal with, that whether you like it or not, if you've been out of the work environment for 1 year, you lose. How do you recoup the lost years or the lost months? And we must have knowledge sharing policies that ensure that women do not suffer as a result of their going on maternity leave. So for me, I think that these are the main issues. We heard about the health issues also. Yes, the best is to breastfeed. But I also think that some of the equipment for breastfeeding, like the mechanized expressors, not the one that you have to be pumping as if you are pumping gas from the gas station. There is a mechanized one that just is such a beauty to watch.
Great.
And it's a bit expensive. These are equipment that we should consider as much as we consider other health benefits, because some women will have to leave their children at home. Some women cannot live within the radius of their office if it's located in Trasaco Valley or airport residential area. You just cannot afford accommodation there. And therefore, the alternative should be looked at. Finally, just one short issue. Now we have no excuse. Right. We have no excuse. This is just one sentence. COVID, if we did not know before, and some of us in our organizations knew before, COVID now has proven to us that you can work efficiently from home. The issue is to have your key performance indicators and to make sure they're complied with. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Gredem. For me, that was so insightful. What I took from the presentation is the fact that we should have a knowledge sharing policy. In fact, I think most companies don't really have these policies. And so when women leave their work and come back, by the time they are back, they lack a lot of, they are behind and all that. So I think it's a great point. And I believe we have a lot of human resource practitioners here. They will adopt this strategy or this policy, and we can enhance how we engage our women at the workplace. Thank you so much for such an insightful section. Now I'll go to Mr. Alberto. You mentioned COVID, Mrs. Hillary. You mentioned COVID. So I want to ask Mr. Alberto that has the current global crisis, as in COVID, had an impact on maternity protection practice in Ghana? Or how has COVID had an impact on maternity protection in Ghana?
Thanks. Once again, I can definitely feel the passion that is coming from my sisters, and for good reason, because they are in it and they experience it, and therefore they can appreciate the gaps and the desperate need for us to make some inroads to improve on the situation as it is. For sure, the situation needed great improvement before the onset of the COVID. But naturally, the COVID had actually come to make it more desperate, since now a lot of our female partners are expected to be working, whilst even having children, they are at home. And this is where I guess the remote working, flexible working regime has now come to stay with us. But the truth of the matter is that earlier on I mentioned cost, and my sister, Mrs. Bedema, also once again talked about it. The cost element is very key. Therefore, the funding model needs to be critically looked at. Even within the government sector, guess what? They even stick to the least 12 weeks. When you say least 12 weeks, it means you can go far beyond that. But the question is, how many of the organizations have opted to go beyond that? Just last week, just as once again it was said, Olam Company came out to say they have increased it from 12 to 16 weeks. I think was it last year or so, Guinness also came out to increase it in a very big way. Here again, they've also touched in the area of paternity leave. And this paternity leave, obviously, Olam says, is it 5 days or so? I think Guinness went beyond that. These are progressive, things that we are hearing, but they are far in between. And it is so because at the end of the day, the bottom line is how much is it going to cost the employer? And is the employer in a position really to take care of that cost? If not, then this is where you find other jurisdictions where the government obviously pushed this into the social security system, whereby they are able to kind of provide a balance between the employer and the social security system, kind of ensuring that this is adequately covered. So in essence, we are saying that, look, ensure that you offer adequate maternity leave provision for our ladies, our sisters, our mothers. In addition to that, don't forget that we've also come to the era where men are expected to also play a role. So why do you exclude men by not giving them paternity leave? As I speak now, I did mention earlier on that I'm on the committee that is actually looking at the Labor Act. The proposal on the table for the maternity leave is to move from 12 weeks to between 16 to 24 weeks. The paternity leave is also, the proposal is between 5 to 10 days. So this is quite progressive. In addition to that, we also identify that Section 57 of the Act assumes that every delivery comes out successfully with a live baby, which we know that is not the case. And therefore, there's a need for a provision to be made in there to ensure that if such a thing happens, then the employer will be compelled to ensure that he provides more time for the employee who experience one challenge or the other. My sister did mention that, yes, they provide 2 weeks or so, but that is the least. And the point is, you may have situations where it requires that you give more than that. Here again, it also, in essence, requires that we look at certain areas where the organizations are compelled to provide, designated places, maybe a creche, just as our sister Yvonne talked about. The data bank I've known has had this all these years. They were in the position to do that, and they are still doing it. But then how many companies can afford that? But somehow, if there's some kind of provision made in the law, then companies will be compelled to do as directed. And here again, if it is not indicated that if you don't do it, such sanctions will be placed on you, then naturally it becomes an option. It's optional. And therefore, if I feel, I'll do it. If I don't like it, I won't do it. But employers must be compelled to ensure that these are made available, these facilities are made.